Welcome to our MOOC on Introduction to Sociology 2, and today we'll be doing Interpretive Sociology, the applications and limitations of this kind of interpretive sociology. Now, the question is, what is interpretive sociology? Interpretive sociology assumes that a researcher's experience or observation of a social phenomena can be very different from the people who are involved in the research and how they go about doing this particular form of research. There is a categorical difference between the two because the person or the people, the subjects, as we say, of the research who are involved in the phenomenon or the act might perceive their problem in an absolutely different way from the way in which the researcher analyzes them, interprets them, and analyzes them. So, there is categorically a difference between the perspective or the point of view between the researcher and his subjects. The focus should therefore lie with understanding the phenomenon from the point of view of the people involved. Interpretive sociology focuses on the meanings people attach to their social world. It shows that reality is constructed by people themselves in their daily lives. What did we say? We have said that the interpretations and actions, social actions of people are very different from what the researcher perceives. Therefore, the everyday world of the social living is constituted by the subjects themselves. Therefore, it is important to recognize how they go about it, what they think about their actions, how they interpret and attach meaning to their actions. Because what the researchers say is the researcher's side of the story. And this story can be different, very different from what the respondents go through, the subjects go through. That means the people who are involved directly in the form of research. Diversion from positivism. It is an approach that centers the importance of meaning and action when studying social behavior and interactions. This approach diverges from the positivistic sociology by recognizing that the subjective experiences, beliefs, and behaviors of people are intrinsic aspects of what we observe. In other words, there is no such thing as a purely objective phenomenon. In simple words, the approach tells us that in order to study and understand society and social phenomenon, we must step outside the shoes and see and understand from the outside. So, it is very clear what is being said. We are trying to say that since individual resides into a different kind of a world altogether, which is not known to the researcher, therefore, his approach, his dimensions and his perspectives might be very different from that of the researcher. The positivistic philosophy or the positivistic science always believes that there are universal laws, casual laws, which must take into consideration the behavior and therefore a universal pattern of society can be drawn. This is very much similar to the physics, chemistry or the biology disciplines, which have its own paradigm and its own theoretical structure. But this cannot be done in sociology and other social sciences where we interpret. And once we give this interpretation, the power to interpret, to the individuals, to the people outside, they try defining and narrating their point of view. Whenever we give them that right, we are wedging a very clear line of difference between positivism and interactionism or interpretivism. So interpretivism is when you are interpreting things from your own point of view. Therefore, as a researcher, when you are moving into this interpretive role, what is very important to you is what? Putting yourself in the shoes of the other. Now, what is putting yourself in the shoes of the other? It is, as invitation to sociology, the Peter Berger has asked us, you have to be a narrator who will tell the story from their point of view, from their respondent's point of view. You will have to leave aside what you are feeling. Then your biases must be kept behind. What you feel, what you think is not your perspective. When you are doing a research on the people who are involved, you need to understand their domain and their position and their orientation. Therefore, putting yourself in the shoes of the other is very important. Unless you put yourself in the shoes of the other, you will not be able to understand their problems, their juxtapositions, and their orientations, which is the central thing in interpretive sociology, because individuals interpret, and when you are doing a research, you have to know how individuals go on interpreting their actions. Understanding social action, Max Weber suggested that we understand the chopping of wood or aiming of a gun in terms of the motive. We know that the wood chopper is working for a wage, for his own use, or possibly is doing it for recreation. But he might also be working through a feat of rage. This is very interesting. And once again, we come back to the position of Max Weber. You remember Max Weber? Yes, we've already met him. Max Weber, a distinguished philosopher and a sociologist, and he conceptualized the word social action. Now, what is social action? Yes, learners, social action is a very interesting thing. It is the way individuals interpret their actions and attach a meaning to their particular action. Weber gives a stunning example. Now, what example does he give us? Yes, he give us the example of a woodcutter. He's chopping a wood. Now, the question is, the moment he's chopping the wood, he must be attaching a meaning to that continuous process of chopping the wood. He might do it for his own livelihood. He might do it for his own passion. He might do it because he's obsessed with chopping the wood, or might be he's doing it because he is absolutely presently in a fit of rage. He's so angry with somebody he's chopping out without any reason. And sometimes we do it. We do our routine activities, but not with the orientation that is routinized. We go outside the domain and do it only to express something else. So for him, at this point of time, chopping the wood might be, it's a vent out for him. It's a way to channelize his anger out, his depression out, or whatever negativities he have within himself. So the meaning is very important, and what exact meaning you put towards it, what exact meaning you attach to your action. Shoes is a wonderful thing. We wear shoes, we go to party wear, along with different party wears, we also put on shoes. That way, shoe is a wear. But again, when you're throwing shoes at somebody, you're very angry, and it's a protest, in a revolution, in a movement. Maybe it's a strategy that you're using to vent out your anger, your all the grievances, all the grudges that you have within yourself. So once the meaning of the object change, the very interpretation changes. So it depends upon the way you interpret your thought of action, the meaning that you attach to the object towards which you act. Weber's position on the interpretive theory of social action. Now, Weber began to take a position on the interpretive theory of social action by 1903, after taking the view that the social sciences were different from the sciences that studied the objective and the natural world. He maintained that these two subjects are different, and therefore the subject matters are also different. Now, what is the Weberian take? He argued that by necessity, each of the sciences sought to obtain different kinds of knowledge. In the natural sciences, knowledge is to be explained in terms of the general laws, while in the social sciences, knowledge must be the internal of the subjective state of individual. Weber said, in the natural sciences, you're talking about the causal laws. You're talking about the positive and external world. A law has to be deduced for the law. And you're talking about the deductive science, where you have to put everything into a proper and external social configuration. But when you are going for the social science, you are studying the actions of the man, because you are studying the social world where you yourself reside. Therefore, the very much living objects, that is the human being themselves, are not mute spectators. They have their own intentions and orientations. The meaning that they attach to the items, the way they interpret their actions might be very different from that of others, which must be studied. Weber thought that observation and investigation in the natural and social sciences take up different orientations, and therefore the observation to look at how individuals act on their understanding, and how this understanding must be related to the my understanding of society. So my understanding of society is related to what? Yes, exactly, to how I interpret my external world. This has nothing to do with what the scientists claim. The natural laws and the natural rules will not be applied here. What applies here is my interpretation of the world. Now, there are 4 concepts through which Weber tried to understand this. Now, these 4 concepts were the understanding or Verstehen, the concept of interpretive understanding, the concept of subjective meaning, and the concept of social action. Central to this discussion is the concept of Verstehen. The term Verstehen literally translates as human understanding, and Weber used it to signify what he thought was unique about the subject matter of the social sciences. In contrast to the sciences of the objective world, the social sciences are concerned with actions of human beings who make judgments and evaluations which lead them to understand and interpret their environment. So, Verstehen is my own subjective understanding, my meaning of the world, through which I come to conclusions. I make judgments, I make verdicts, and I come out with my take on the subject matter. Therefore, in order to understand how individual arrives at his decision, we need to understand his subjectivity, his way of understanding the world, without which we won't be able to understand his take and his point of view, rather his paradigm. That has to be understood. Now, according to Weber, this meant that human actors possess understanding, in contrast to the objects of the physical sciences, which are devoid of any understanding. Since the subject matter of the natural sciences do not possess understanding, it therefore stands to reason that the methods of the natural sciences must be disqualified. As we had already said, that the 2 domains are different, therefore natural sciences uses a method where it goes to the deductive method, where you're moving from the universal to the particular, and there is no need to understand the orientations or the soft skills of the man, because the man at all is not involved here, only inanimate objects are. Therefore, Weber says that the 2 level of understanding being different, the 2 domain knowledge being different, the methodologies will also have to be different. Now, a second concept in Weber's theory is social action, which is nothing but the interpretive understanding. And this is very different from direct understanding. The other is interpretive understanding. What is direct understanding? Where you see the cues and come to a conclusion. You do not have to think anything else. So 2 plus 2 is 4. It is as clear as anything. And there is no need that you need to understand it. You need to give a lot of effort into it. You will have to find out the inferences. No requirement, because natural science mode or the laboratory sciences, the hard sciences are more surface in their nature, are more external in their nature. It is easier to comprehend what they come out with. But finding conclusions, coming out with very, cogent finding is very difficult in the social sciences. Why? Because sometimes even the physical evidences belie the facts. Maybe I fish out a questionnaire to my learners and they give me certain responses. But on the counter checking, I find that the responses that they have given me is absolutely wrong. This has nothing to do with what they believe. For instance, if I say that, are you happy with the present system of education? Many of the children might write yes, and they're very satisfied with their system of education. But when I go to the village and I try tracing them, I might find that in a certain village, maybe not in all villages, because we know that education system is now on its glamorous way. But in certain villages, a very remote village, we might find many dropouts. But they have written that they're absolutely happy with their education. They go to school every day. So, therefore, explanatory understanding and indirect understanding is very different from that of direct understanding. And when you are going for explanatory understanding, there has to be an additional interpretation, where the cues speak to you. And there are certain things which you have to see and understand, where, like positivism, everything will not be told to you. Everything will not be very sharp and very, cogent or very opium. Okay, it should not be very transparent that way. So certain things you have to find out. Certain things you have to be more intuitive about. So whenever we are talking about Verstehen, we are talking about subjective understanding, we talk about intuition. Certain things has to be understood and comprehended, which is not given to us. So whether it's an overt understanding or a covert understanding, that depends upon your ways to interpret and come to a conclusion. So Weber has spelled it very clearly that what is important in explanatory understanding in interpretative sociology is when you're moving for understanding the context, which is very important. Social context must be taken into consideration. The social actors, what they are doing, how they are attaching meaning to the objects or the items, that remains very important here. Now we also come to the interpretive theory of social action. I will not go to the much detailed investigation here, but as I said that social action is whenever people are attaching a meaning to their action, any action without meaning or interpretation doesn't qualify to become a subjective action or a social action. Now, therefore, you need to understand the actions and how others interpret them. So only looking at an interaction or an action, being mute spectator won't do. If you are a sociologist or if you are a social scientist, then you will have to understand. You will have to understand how people go about it, how people interpret their actions. That must be understood. Therefore, this nexus that we have between understanding and interpretation and the social context, this nexus becomes an important consideration for understanding interpretive sociology, how people go about interpreting their actions and the social situations into which they are embedded. Therefore, we find that the social actions are important, and these are the areas of application of interpretive sociology. And whenever we apply the norms of interpretive sociology, we also have to understand the different types of social action, to understand how people actually apply their understanding of interpretivism or how they interpret their social action. In order to understand this application, we also need to know the types of social action. The first is definitely traditional action. Traditional action is the first type of social action discussed by Weber, where individual reacts automatically to the problems in the outside world and to the external circumstances in a habitual manner. Now, this is very important. Traditional actions are what? Those actions where individuals are, monotonously, mechanically, like a robot, carrying out their actions without weighing the means against the end. So, they are not measuring anything. They are not talking about the optimum value that is attached to their action. They are doing it just as a routine action. Effectual action is a second type of action that is referred by Weber, where it satisfies a need for revenge, sensual gratification, devotion, and contemplative bliss. In this context, the actor is directly impelled to act on the basis of an emotional response and is determined by the state of mind of the actor, where you are giving out your vengeances, your revengeful actions, your emotions. So it's a lot about the emotional state of mind and how you go about expressing that. Okay, here also you're not weighing your means to an end or how much you are gaining from that particular action. So here also the meaning that you attach is more prevalent in your mental state. Now, this kind of value rational action is a third type of rational action, where the ultimate values act as a guide to action, and where in the last two kinds of action that we have seen, that is traditional action and effectual action, individuals attach a meaning, but that may not be that much meaningful to them in the sense that they are not trying to gain anything out of it. But value rational action is actually when you are doing something because of the value added to it. Now, this attaching value to an action is important because this value may be unnecessary or might seem redundant to another individual. For instance, Dalai Lama, the way he proposes and spreads the message of love, friendship, or humanity may not be understood by a capitalist person or a person who is an entrepreneur or a businessman. So this can be understood, your values can be understood only by or within the regular framework of the values that you've created for yourself. And this is how you attach meaning to it. This might not remain meaningful to the other people. This instrumental rational action, when we move towards it, this is perhaps the optimum kind of social action that Weber was saying, because a lot of meaning goes in it, and where individual is actually looking for a means to an end, and where people actually look for the optimum value attached to it. So you give a lot of meaning to it, and maybe out of the four types of action, instrumental rational action can become more meaningful because you're doing it with a force. You're giving more meaning to it. You're not doing it casually in a fit of rage, or because you have to do it, you're in a habit, or suddenly you want to express your emotions, or you're doing it out of your value. You're doing it because you want to do it. So, here is a thrust. Here is a more knocking the thing, and it is more stronger, and therefore this urge, the passion becoming more stronger, there is an ulterior motive to it, and you're doing it with a perfect meaning. Now, another application of the area of interpretive sociology is definitely hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is also a discipline, a methodology through which we are trying to interpret the actions, sometimes texts of others. So hermeneutic aims to explain social phenomenon by interpreting people's behavior within that particular social context. So these are all, juxtaposed, all collaged into this greater paradigm of interpretism. So interpretivism is more when you're going for biblical studies, jurisprudences, medicine, and those very complex texts when you are trying to deconstruct and read it in your own way and interpret, then also you will apply the hermeneutics. Next, we'll come to phenomenology. This is another application area of interpretivism. Now, what is phenomenology? Phenomenology is closely related to hermeneutics. It starts from the premise that people are not inert objects and they think and feel about the world around them. So the way positivism starts from the external world, this phenomenology starts from the internal world, when they're looking for the motives and actions of the people, and they're trying to say that the external world is not absolutely the be-all and end-all of everything. Physical world will not be able to give every answer to my question, because there are many cues, there are many signs, there are many things which has to be interpreted on your own way. The cues are missing which you have to find out. So not everything is written on my face. You will have to go for face reading. You have to go for verbal and non-verbal interactions. You must be able to understand both verbal and non-verbal interactions, because not everything will be spelled out. You will be the person who shall be able to understand that, deduce that with your insight, with your deductions, with your sixth sense, and with your own speculative capacity. This is how you go on making an investigation with your insightfulness. Very keen, insightful person can do it. Now, there are several assumptions that phenomenology had actually rejected. This is very clear to us because positivism went for objectivism, which phenomenology has rejected, because it thought that universal patterns of behaviors are never possible, because individuals are interpretive in their own way. They belong to a different kind of epoch. Their historical understanding of the truth, their understanding of the social world, and they being social actors, independent and autonomous in their own right, they will take their own decisions, which cannot be understood or universally spelled out by the positivists. Now, there are different kinds of phenomenology. Starting from Edmund Husserl, we can go to Max Scheler, Martin Heidegger, Alfred Schutz. All of them were creating different kinds of phenomenology. Alfred Schutz and his intersubjectivity is very important, where we are trying to find out what the other person knows about me. This is best understood by using the word life world. What is life world? Life world is my world of ideas, my visions, my visionaries, my everything which is on my platter. And in order for you to understand what I'm doing, what I'm saying, how I am acting, you will have to merge yourself. You have to absolutely dip and plunge into my life world. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand. For instance, if I go to a madrasa and suddenly start studying the behaviorisms of the Muslim girls who come from very, different kind of a background maybe. So their religious education is very different from that of mine. So unless I understand their life world, their ideas, I won't be able to understand their life. Next, we'll come to ethnomethodology. It is the study of everyday life. The people use different kind of methods to understand, to debunk the everyday practices and activities of the people. Now, ethno refers to the particular social group. Method requires the practices, the strategies that are devised to understand and learn the everyday activities, the everyday life chances of the people. So, ethnomethodological research can be done in different kind of social settings, and the social settings where you have to be local. You cannot put yourself away from it. You have to dip yourself in the minds of the people and into their everyday activities in order to understand how they are kind of interpreting their lives. Harold Garfinkel is definitely one of the philosophers who have used this kind of a method, and he was trying to find out how a jury produce themselves in a jury room as a jury, how a decision is being meted out, how a verdict is being delivered, and how witnesses go on talking about themselves. So in a regular setup, in a very daily setup, he was trying to find out how individuals interpret their meaning and how it is interpreted by the judge himself, who is trying to judge the truthness of the people who are delivering. Dramaturgy is yet another method of ethnomethodology. It is propounded by the very famous Erving Goffman. And Goffman said that actually dramaturgy is nothing but way of presenting yourself. In his very famous book, Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, he says that everyone of us are actors in our own special lives and daily affairs. We are actually actors in a theater on the stage where you are performing yourself. You're performing yourself. Why? Because you want to present yourself as an individual. So any professional or unprofessional sphere where you are going, you're actually trying to find an interaction between the audience and the actor. So our behaviors are nothing but a kind of an interaction between the audience and the actor, where you are trying your best to satisfy the people beyond you, and you're trying to act in a way so that the people are not able to understand your flaws and your errors. The better your performance is, the more vocal and wonderful an actor you are. This is how we change ourselves. Ourself is not something which very solid, but something which is flexible, because we always try to persuade others. This is what is impression management. We never bring out our true selves. Our selves are changing. They are like volatile and ever changing. Now, what are the limitations of this particular interpretive sociology? There's a layered interpretation. See, a lot of interpretation boards. I am going to interpret my actors, and then they'll be writing something narrative or a questionnaire where they have tried interpreting their actions. Then I will go on interpreting their actions. So much is lost in this game of interpretivism. And therefore, the researcher interprets a subject's interpretation and then interprets the findings and try to place it within a framework. Therefore, there's always a chance of misinterpretation, because you never know, and there's no way you can actually reach out to the real person you are, the real person that you want to reach out to, because there's a lot of interpretations within, and because of changing hands and because of multiple interpretations, much things get lost in the vacuum. A second very serious problem with interpretive sociology is, we may talk about idiosyncratic research, we talk about inductive research, and at the end of the day, we suggest that there can be no universal theory which can decide everything at one go. But then at some point of the time, there must be a systematization, there must be a universal theory which suggests people. If we are trying to say that nothing is the absolute word and everything is about to change, then we are also suggesting that we live in a very dramatic world where everything changes at the flip of the hat. If that is supposed to be done, how can we come to a universal solution? Societies might change, their contexts might differ, but I have to come to a universal explanation and solution, which probably is not possible with interpretive sociology. So, what exactly and how exactly will you understand the subject's point of view is very difficult. And even when Weber talked about Verstehen, Schutz spoke about intersubjectivity, Husserl spoke about phenomenology, and they was talking about the life world, but nobody could actually find out how exactly I can understand what is going on in the minds of the other. This definitely is the limitation of the qualitative research, which must be overcome. And unless we overcome that, we won't be able to find a solution for itself. We let the world become so unorganized at one point of time, it will be difficult for us to settle down for a more settled and an ambiguous and a more unanimous kind of an understanding. Right now, the only solution we have in our hand is to go for a mixed kind of research, where we will go for both quantitative research and qualitative research, so that there will be an attempt to understand, interpret the actions of the others, but with a limitation, so that the right amount of objectivity mixed with the right dose of subjectivity will be a solution that the society might be waiting for. So it's better we move for a mixed kind of a research. Thank you.